All right, guys, welcome back into the Non-Blonde Cafe this morning. Very excited. I have a guest this morning, Rita Coolidge. Good morning. What an honor.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, you better believe it. Well, a couple weeks ago, we heard about your memoir coming out, and I was very excited about it. So we've been talking a lot about it lately. Let's go back to when you first, in the 70s, when you first started back in music. How did you know that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I think because I came from a musical family and sang all of my life. I think that probably when I was 3 years old and heard Peggy Lee sing, in my little girl mind, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I think that dream stayed with me through school, through Florida State, and getting my degree and singing all the way through school. And when I finished, when I graduated from Florida State, I was offered an assistantship for graduate school, which was quite an honor. And I just said, I gotta go try this music. So if it's still here in a year, I'll come back and let you know what my decision is. And they said, go for it. So after that year, I had had enough success with music and realized that I could make a living with music, and so I went back to Florida State and said, thanks very much, I'm going for it.
Wow, that's awesome. See, and I was born in 71, but I wasn't, the teenage and like that during that time. I always thought I should have been because I absolutely loved the 70s and where you guys were. Tell us a little bit about your experiences in the 70s. And I mean, you guys were all making music and performing. It was a new day and age.
I think when I drove from Memphis to California with Leon Russell in 1968, and when I got to L.A. and became a part of the music scene at that time, I call it the golden age of rock and roll, because there were so many people in Los Angeles that were making music together. People had not reached that place of competition yet. We were all so young and just so happy to have found each other. And the bands that I played in with Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett and all of those musicians most of those people had kind of migrated from the South and Oklahoma, and we were just kind of people that had been taken out of our southern roots and connected at the hip in California. And it was the best music that I have ever been a part of. I still listen to those records and look back at that time, and I'm just so grateful to have been a part of it, because, I mean, the Eagles were making those records. Laurel Canyon was full of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Mama Cass, and Frank Zappa, and all of these people that lived up in the canyon and were making music together. You could literally drive up through the canyon at night and hear people out on the balconies in their yards playing guitars and singing, and it was just fabulous. I think it's before cocaine and some of the other nasty drugs came on the scene, and everything was just so clear and clean and wonderful.
Right. Well, you eventually married Chris Christopherson, and I wanted to ask you something on a side note of that. Do you remember one of his guitar players, Jerry McGee?
Of course I did, from the Ventures. Yes, I remember. I know Jerry well. He's a great guy. But we were touring Japan one time, our first tour, I think, in Japan, and McGee went with us as our guitar player. And when we got to the hotel, we see these throngs of people, and Chris and I looked at each other, and we're thinking, well, we didn't know that our records had done that well in Japan. And we walked in the lobby, and all of these Japanese fans jumped on Jerry McGee, and we were totally ignored. He was lost and swept up in the crowd.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you where Jerry lives today, about 15 minutes from here in Mamou, Louisiana.
Well, right. He's from Louisiana, right?
Exactly. So we thought it was a treat, and we just wanted to see if you would remember him and still caught up with him. Okay, now let's get down to the business here. You have your memoir out, Delta Lady. Tell us how you came to it, and tell us about some of the issues in it.
Well, I think because I'm a storyteller from a storytelling family, and I I always tell stories when I'm on stage performing, and many of the stories are for the past 20 years. I'll tell a story, and one of the band members will say, "I've never heard that one before. You need to write a book." So after that, that dialogue for the past, I would say, 20 years, I finally got kind of worn down and talked to my manager, and she said, "I think it's time to do the book as well." She had been after me for some years to get started on the book, and it just seemed like the right time. And started it 3 years ago. It's a long process, so unlike making an album.
Right.
Because with a book, you have to find a literary agent and the publishing company and an editor, and all of these choices determine so many things about the kind of book it's going to be and how it's going to be done. So it was a process, and I'm thrilled with the reception of this book. I can't even tell you what a surprise it is.
Well, one of the issues that came out was about Layla, Eric Clapton's Layla that he's received. For years and years, it's all been about him. And in your memoir, say that you actually helped write part of that song, but was never given credit for it.
That's right. It's actually the piano coda, which people recognize, and I think is part of the magic of Layla. And that song goes back to a song that I had written with Jim Gordon, who is given credit on Layla. He was the drummer with Derek and the Dominoes. But a year or so before, Jim and I had written a song together called Time, Don't Let the World Get in Our Way. And we did a demo, and we played it for Eric when he was in the studio recording his first solo album. We left the demo on the piano, and I didn't think any more about it when he didn't record it. And about a year later, I was in the studio having my picture made, and all of a sudden over the speakers I hear music that's so familiar. And I just started, I think, probably screaming, "That's my music, that's my song, I wrote that." And tried to get in touch, of course, with Eric when I saw that my name was not listed on the writer's credit. And I was directed to his manager, Robert Stigwood, who was just a mogul in the music business in England. Nothing got to Eric without going through Robert Stigwood or Stiggy. And he just basically, when I talked to him, he said, "What are you going to do? You're a girl. You can't do anything. You're just a girl." And bottom line was, I didn't have the funds, I didn't have the money to go up against that giant in England. So I just continued to tell my story.
Well, I know that had to be hard to deal with for so many years, knowing the truth behind it, but most didn't know it.
I think that the way I was able to resolve that and to come to some peace was because the man that I wrote the song with, Jim Gordon, was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia some years later and killed his mother, and he's serving out his time in a psychiatric ward in California, in a prison psychiatric ward. And he had a daughter who was just the sweetest little girl, and when I realized that probably all those royalties that Jim had, mine and his, were going to Amy,
right,
that she had something from her father other than the fact that he had killed her grandmother, I just came to some kind of peace with that. And all I really wanted was my name on the record. I would still like to have my name on it. I just want credit for my work. That's all I ever really wanted.
I hear that. Well, where are we going to be able to find your book, Delta Lady? I'm sure it's available everywhere.
It is. If there are bookstores, I know that Barnes & Noble will carry it. And if there are any, mom and pop bookstores, they're there. But it's been on Amazon for about 6 months for pre-order, and you can definitely get it on Amazon.
Okay, well, very good. Rita Coolidge, my special guest this morning. I am so happy to have talked with you, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks for having me on your show.